Thank you very much for all those organizations and especially the people on the front end and the back end for helping to make this an opportunity for me to share some online resources. It's a great opportunity because I probably am experiencing many of the same issues and problems as many of you, maybe most of you who are teachers of earth science at one level or another over the last couple of years. And perhaps you might find some of the online resources that I've developed, they're open source, they're without charge, there is no authentication. You may find them of use in your drive to better engage your students and also to align with the increasingly important national standards that are not only critical for the next generation of students, but also help to emphasize the importance of student education to our state legislators as well. So what I'd like to do today, and let me make sure I've got some controls, is to provide some background on the an introduction to the background on why I needed to develop these online resources for my own teaching, and also then to provide you with some demonstrations that will begin to acquaint you with the wealth of online media available to you with literally the click of a mouse. I do have unknown samples on my websites, and there are no answer keys on the websites. I'll be happy to provide you an answer key to all of those unknowns for the identification of samples by simply writing me a request. And I may not have 40 minutes of introduction here, so we'll have lots of time for open discussion at the end as well. So I used to be in my office on campus, and that's the way the world used to be, but it's not that way today, as we all know. Just a brief note about UAB. I was hired out of graduate school, very, very lucky to get a tenure track job at the time, back in 1979, here in Alabama at UAB, one of the 3 state campuses of the University of Alabama system. I am the only geologist on campus and the only geology instructor, and you'll understand why in a moment. I do teach introductory physical geology lecture and lab. I teach 2 lectures and 2 labs each semester. Most of the students that register into my class are gen ed students, although I do get other students from the science departments and engineering across campus as well. I don't need to say much about this. As earth scientists, we all emphasize probably right at the beginning of our courses the importance of rocks and minerals as materials that ultimately they support modern civilization. The nature's products through weathering ultimately put food on our table. Here in Birmingham, we have a history going back into the mid 19th century of the extraction of limestone, iron ore, and bituminous coal, all within just a few miles of here of central Alabama. And that led to the development of the furnaces that first produced pig iron for the Confederate Army during the Civil War, and later became the foundation in part for US Steel down here in the southeast of the United States. Within literally the last 30 days, I saw a notification from the United States Geological Survey that they have enlarged their historical list. I believe it was 19 critical minerals, now to 50 in 2022. And those 50 minerals are what the United States imports to some degree, to nearly 100% for many of them, in order to create the kinds of high-tech products that, in fact, like cell phones that we all have in our pockets. And this is one of those connections that is pretty easy to make to students because they all carry their cell phones to campus, of course. So what I'd like to do right here at the beginning, before we get too far into the weeds, is to have you enter some responses into just 3 short poll questions. because it's important for me to better understand whether you have physical samples of minerals, and I'm talking about minerals now, whether you have physical samples of minerals that you use in your teaching. And if you don't, 0 is an answer, a multiple choice answer. And if so, how many do you use? So let's take a minute for you to just enter your responses. And let's see how many resources we have. Let's see, we've got Bradley, is that it?
Yep, this is the first poll.
Okay, great. So what do we have? We've got 4 out of 18. We've got about a fifth to a quarter of the registrants who do not have physical samples to teach from. We have 6%, 1/16 who have only 5 minerals, twice that, 6 to 10, and actually half who have more than 10 minerals to teach from. Good. So number 2, let's go to, can I get to number 2 on mine as well? And there we go. All right, now they're showing up. So let's see, poll. Bradley, I'm not getting the poll pop up on my screen. I had to bounce off and come back.
If you click into Zoom, you should be able to see it.
I am on Zoom now. Oh, well. Well, that's not showing up on mine. Oh, there it is. Appreciate it. All right. So we've got most folks happening. So it looks like there are considerable number, get about half, where 1 to 3 students actually share kits in a group. And that's an important piece of information, especially with regard to my teaching as well, because I limit my labs to 24 students. And I then also cannot carry 24 kits to lab as well. So poll question number 3. Could you pop that up? Thank you, Bradley. Do you have tools for students to use testing the identification of minerals? If you just give them the minerals, that's none. If you have one, oh, but this is 1 or more, and various tools that you might be using are the standard ones, including streak plates, acid bottles, magnets, glass plates, and so on and so forth. Well, it looks like maybe about a third of you actually do not have tools that you use, probably in a restricted mineral identification lab. All right, well, look, what I see from these polls then is that, like many of you, I have undergone constraints on the materials available to me with regard to what I can buy and what I have available to take to students in the geology labs. And that is not an inconsiderable constraint in our ability to teach basic physical geology, even to what I teach are non-majors gen ed students. So let me just give you a bit of background on how I got to the motivation for building the websites and the resources that I hope you might find useful in one way or another. So I was hired out of graduate school, very, very lucky, in 1979 into a little 4 faculty member department, teaching geology students in a BS program only. And by the mid-1990s, the Alabama Commission on Higher Education established minimum viability requirements, as many other states had, for programs at public universities. It turns out that by the mid-1990s, UAB was graduating about 5.5 geology students a year, bachelor students a year, and our requirement was 7.5. We got no support from the administration to bump up our program. And ultimately, we got the death sentence in 1996. By 1998, my program was closed. I was the junior faculty member. Everybody else retired or went away. And my line, tenured line for 19 years, was transferred to the chemistry department here at UAB. The next phase of my career happened in 2017. Behind the label, you can see the destruction of the old geology annex in which I had been teaching geology labs for 19 years. There was a new teaching building going up on campus, very close to us, and this little building was slated for destruction. It was. And with its destruction, I made a request for other space on campus to transfer my geology labs to. But unfortunately, I got no response from the administration. And without a dedicated lab, no place for students to come back to look at the materials on a week-to-week basis, and no ability for me to give them these samples in order to study outside of the regularly scheduled lab. I was in a bit of a pickle, and to say it mildly. And so I find it sort of ironic that I was tasked with teaching physical geology lab without a physical geology lab. And I thought that was pretty funny at the time, but actually it was a challenge that was really difficult for me to sort of envision how I was going to continue doing my job for teaching lab without a lab. And so that's really the ultimate motivation. When the annex was torn down, I scavenged what I could of the old geology department and transferred 1,000 pounds of materials to our basement. And so the solution obviously was to create some kind of portable kits. So it turns out that summer, what I did is I scavenged every Walmart superstore within 20 miles, and I found the perfect fishing tackle boxes that had 2 by 1.5 inch compartments, 12 on each side, to hold mineral and rock specimens. And so that's what I did. I spent a summer building fishing tackle, converting fishing tackle boxes into 6 portable kits. My labs are limited to 24 students. I'm the only one teaching my labs. And then I had a kit for every 4 students. So these are the unknowns. Those are on my website in addition to others. And what I can do is put them in a bag that I carry to whatever classroom the registrar happens to assign to me that particular semester. But that didn't solve the problem of how the students have access to this material when they're not in my 3-hour lab on campus and they need to study that material before the quiz the next week. So that was the motivation for me to build basically a home studio with my old cell phone, some software, and I had to learn what I had to learn that was basically just good enough to get the job done. And so I wound up building 4 websites, one for minerals, one for sedimentary, igneous, and metamorphic rocks. And you can get to these websites either directly, as I mentioned, or you can get an introduction to them through a website which I call a portal at geonline.georockme.com. Georockme.com is the domain name for all of this material, and the 4 websites are the subdomains at that particular site. And so again, you can get to them minerals at omg.georockme.com, IGG, SEG, or MEG. Now, my minerals website is the one I've worked most on. The others are really sort of bare bones, but as I said, there's only me, and I was able to do just enough to get the job done. So I'm going to concentrate on the mineral website today. So before the pandemic hit, and of course, I didn't know it was coming like everybody else, I did have just enough done on the mineral website to present it at the Summer Earth Educators Rendezvous in Nashville, 2019. There were about maybe 35 or 40 colleagues there, maybe some of whom are here today. And I said, you know what, I've had to create this for my students who miss lab, students who are sick, students, I don't have a place for them to come back to study. So I've created all of the online materials that they can make observations from, even though they can't pick up and handle the rocks. And so that was the first sort of public announcement of my website. But of course, the pandemic hit in early 2020. And what I did is I went to Google Analytics just on the other day, I think it was Tuesday. And what you see here is a record of the uses of just my mineral website, omg.georockme.com, from January 1st of 2020 to Tuesday, March 16th. It turns out that although I participated on some geoscience webinars during the summers, when we were all trying to figure out how the heck are we going to teach from the remote environment, it turns out that I didn't advertise, but word does get around. People were looking on the web. CERC was a fantastic resource to help spread the word for all of the different resources we were posting online. And as of Tuesday, I've got something like shy of 70,000 users worldwide and close to 1 million hits. The pandemic pulses for semesters are very easily seen. So what I'd like to do is to emphasize that I've designed georockme.com. Although I designed it for me, I designed it to be not a laboratory activity, not a substitute for the fantastic AGI NAGT laboratory manual, for which the current edition is a fantastic upgrade. But I designed it as a series of resources, components that can be mixed and matched. And so if you think about a tool chest, as you wander around the website, you may find bits and pieces that might be helpful for you to incorporate within your own laboratory activities. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a tour of the website and talk a little bit about how these bits and pieces can be deployed. Now, one of the comments that I got early in the pandemic, and thank you notes from a lot of my colleagues, again, many of whom I don't know personally, is that they were looking for rock and mineral specimens on the web that were not identified. And so I have a separate page of unknowns, 28 different minerals that are not identified, and I have a bank of minerals that are, for reference. I also have a section of activities, which are Word documents that I've created and others have created to provide some applications of the uses of minerals and our materials supporting various parts of our civilization today. So when you see my PDF reproduced in the drive later, you will also note the little icon that I have here in the upper right-hand corner that has the globe and www. These are hyperlinked directly to the web pages, and I'll show you how to hyperlink any parts of my website to your own documents in just a minute. These are hyperlinks directly to that section. So let's see if this works. Oh, it does work. Fantastic. So here is the web page at my website. This is on omg.georockme.com. And I've got the website set up on the page so that as you scroll down, you can see these various activities. And what will happen is you can pop them out with this little icon in the upper right-hand corner. Let's see, does it work? It does. And those PDFs, if you want to just download them as a PDF, that's fine. You can also write me for the Word document itself. In fact, I'll put the Word documents on the Google Drive for you directly. A lot of you may already use Mineral Baby as an entry into the study of minerals and rock materials by the Minerals Education Coalition. Very, very helpful. Students find that fascinating. And lots of other activities that have been designed by other colleagues like Joy Bronland and Bhattacharya that are already available on the various CERC websites. We have a driveway that really needs replacement, and there's an interesting website that provides a calculator on how much does your driveway cost. It's very interesting, and I built that into my activity on sedimentary rocks and minerals. One of the activities that I've been working on for a period of years is based upon a USGS publication, a recent publication on critical minerals that are needed for US Navy SEAL gear. And I've created a series of questions that refer to that general interest publication, but the questions take students into the periodic table. It takes the students to retrieve the information in the pub to show which countries dominate the sources of those critical minerals. And then I ask them questions about what the consequences of the US depending upon those foreign relationships are. So again, I'm trying to build in more and more of the kinds of applications that go far beyond just the task of identifying mineral and rock samples. So if you're interested in some of these activities or others, I've got others that I create on a semester-to-semester basis. Please just write me. In addition, and I'll take you through the other sections of the website here in just a minute. I have an entire section on showing students how to actually perform the tests that they would otherwise perform manually. And so I actually use this in my face-to-face lab. I don't teach using an acid bottle anymore. I don't teach doing a streak test anymore. I don't teach scratching a glass plate in mineral hardness because I've got short YouTube videos that I've recorded for that purpose. And so this is actually now saving me a lot of time and I think doing a better job in my face-to-face laboratory session. But let me continue with one section and then I'll come back to those other tests in just a minute. I found, I don't know about you, but I found that teaching luster, metallic versus non-metallic, especially to gen ed students, this is really a difficult task. And so I put together, I think this is a couple of years ago, I must have read about this on the web, in using a simple flashlight as a metal detector. And so I put together a web page under testing minerals on electrical conductance and electricity. And so what I found actually is sort of interesting. As I was going to Walmart, I found that Walmart has literally $1 flashlights. Here it is, $1 flashlights. And so I went out and bought 12 of them for 12 bucks. And the flashlights, I take the class when they're disassembled. And I ask the students to figure out how to put them back together, which is no big deal, and to figure out how they work with a piece of copper wire. And once they figure out how they work, so for example, again, these are a couple little short videos that I show my students. In fact, they're in my lab, is that when you have a piece of metal that conducts electrons, well, the flashlight lights. In other words, it acts as the switch on the end of the flashlight. And so what I discovered is that of all the common metallic minerals in a common mineral identification set, it turns out that every one of them, except hematite, which is submetallic, every one of them will conduct enough electricity to light the flashlight. And so actually, I am not, I'm not teaching luster anymore. I'm passing out my flashlights in order to have the students actually do that as a way of identifying the metallic minerals, except for hematite in lab. And this is sort of fun. This was last semester. After they assemble the flashlight in order to prove that they got it working correctly, I turn to the class, have the lights turned out, and I ask the students to flash me. Look, if you can't make a joke from time to time, what good is it, right? All right, so let's go back to the mineral identification test, because as I said, what do you do in the remote environment? And in fact, how do I find this useful in my face-to-face class? As I said, for every one of the unknowns, what I did is I made a video of every test. Here's the test for magnetism. This happens to be a piece of magnetite. Of course, it's very easy for the students to identify that with a paper clip. So in the remote environment, they don't get to do this, but they get to see the result nonetheless. And what about the acid test for calcium carbonate containing rocks. Well, I've got pretty good close-ups. And again, I don't tell the student what the result is on the video. They can see the bubbles, and when they understand the results of the acid test, well, okay, they don't get to pick up the rock and drop the drop of acid on it, but they do get to see the result, and they can mark that in a response sheet. In rocks, I actually sort of thought it would be fun to see whether rocks burn. And so for the sedimentary rocks and coal, I put a blowtorch on every one that was unknown. Whoops, let's stop that. And then in order to demonstrate mineral cleavage and fracture, again, I have a short video, no narration. I'm not telling the students what they're supposed to see or how they're supposed to interpret it. I build this in as a way of allowing the students to watch what happens, and they then can assess the results in order to fill in questions and answer sheets as parts of the unknown. So I'm using now this in my face-to-face class as online resources, even though it was developed in part for face-to-face and used during the pandemic. Now, I've also built, and actually I didn't build this, Google put it in. I found out a couple of years ago that Google has installed something that is not visible until you look for it. It's called a copy heading link. And so I'm going to show you the web page. Again, this is online, and you can read through it. You can actually incorporate any of the pages on my websites by simply copying the URL from the top. That's fine. What I discovered is that if you go to a heading on any of the pages, what looks like a little paperclip or they call it a heading link appears. And if you click that, it automatically does a copy to the clipboard. So here it is. This is on my clipboard. I'm going to paste it in Control V, and you can put this in a Word document. You can put it in an Excel sheet. You can put it in a web page online. And that particular link not only goes to the page, it actually goes to the particular heading on the page, which I would call a paragraph in a sense. So I find this a really useful tool that that Google built into their web pages, I think a few years ago. There are online activities, as I mentioned, again, in my PDF that you will see as a reproduction of the PowerPoint presentation. The little globe will take you directly to that web page, and then you can copy or refer students to any of those particular pages that you might have any interest in. Now, during the pandemic, well, actually, this is pre-pandemic. This is after Nashville, and during the pandemic, I communicated with a lot of my colleagues, and it turns out that Carolina Michelle in Chandler Community College in Arizona, Julia up in Nashville, Trisha out there at Drexel in Philly, Alex out there in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas. I had a lot of colleagues who wrote me for answer keys to my mineral unknowns, which I kindly sent along. And I said, well, would you send me a copy of your lab write-up and make it under Creative Commons, like all of my stuff, so that we could share it with the community? And so again, I will post, this will be on the Drive folder that you have access to. These are the mineral identification Word documents that Trisha is using at Drexel and Carolina is using out at Chandler, and Joel is using up there at Belmont in Nashville. These are their mineral identification write-ups for which they are using links to the minerals in the OMG website. So if you're interested in how others are using these resources, we have a lot of examples. Thank you to those colleagues as well. And with regard to the flashlight activity, it's not just a matter of in my sense, what I wanted to do is to go beyond just identifying minerals. And so what I've done is I've put online the activity that I constructed in order for students to work through, not just to find the metallic minerals, but I've actually created an activity that will help them to better understand the electrical circuits that a flashlight makes, what a battery role is, and I've created sections that will take them into the materials or the movements of electrons in a metal. So this is the actual write-up itself. And let me go back to the web page. It's under electrical conductance and electricity. And so here is a primer that I thought would be more interesting to some of my students to learn about the applications of metallic minerals, both in archaeology with regard to the 3 ages based upon those metals, as well as their properties in the movement of electrons and the properties from the flashlight in terms of electrical circuits. So that's my goal, actually, as I continue to teach introductory geology, physical geology lecture and lab to a population largely of non-majors. And so this may or may not be consistent with the kind of instruction you are aligning your students to, but those are how my resources are directed on my website. So what I've come to understand is that my learning objectives should really drive the resources that I put online. And I've come to appreciate better more the applications that we could find out of the United States Geological Survey, the Minerals Education Coalition, the USGS, AGI as well, that helps students to better understand why minerals are important in modern civilization today. So let me just finish up the short presentation, and then I'll open up. We'll have plenty of time for discussion. I want to finish up with an extension beyond my websites. So you've got those available to you, and these are not as well fleshed out as my minerals website. But I wanted to alert you to the fact that I've got a YouTube channel where I've put those hundreds of videos, each of them individually. So you can get to them through the online mineral guide website, or you can get to those through my YouTube channel. But I also 2 years ago was very fortunate enough to have been working with a colleague, Rob Nosofsky, an internationally known cognitive psychologist at Indiana, who was brought together with me as he was studying what the brain does in learning categories. And he had already done a little bit of work with the geology department at Indiana on how students identify rocks, because those are just categories, names of rocks and minerals. And so I was already building 3D models. And when we got together, we decided, well, you know, there's no data on how students learn how to identify rocks. And so we got together. We were very, very fortunate in getting an NSF grant, which is active at the present time. But you'll find links to my 3D models on Sketchfab. And a lot of us are doing this nowadays. I'm not the only one. But here's an example of a March 2020 sample of basalt from Iceland from that volcanic eruption. And let's just get it back. Oh yeah, let me just, whew, it's sort of neat. Students like going inside of the rocks. In any case, I do have some honoraria if you can help contribute rocks to the project. I've got a couple $1,000 that hasn't been spent yet. So please take a look at the background of the NSF award. And over here on the right-hand side, I've got a QR code, and you've got my email address. I can contribute some small amounts of money, and I have some specific rock categories that I really need to fill in the blanks. please write me if you'd like, a few bucks to send me a couple of rocks that I can feed into the project, and that will be cited in our progress as well. So that's what I've got, and just about 3:40. So we've got an extra 10 or 15 minutes, and be happy to stop sharing, or Missy, how would you like to do this? Just throw it open.
Yeah, Scott, first off, thank you very much. You should see the chat box. It's a buzz with compliments and thanking you for all of your resources. So the audience is, and including myself, we're just delighted with everything that you've shared, and the heart that you put into all of this is just amazing. So greatly appreciated. Ed has been compiling some questions for us in the background. So Ed, if you have a few questions to pass along to Scott, and then we'll have the audience, if you have some additional questions, please jump in. As Scott mentioned, we do have a little bit of time here.
Yeah, and again, continue to feel free to put things in the chat. I'm glad Missy pointed out the many kudos that are in the chat, because people are finding these very useful. But just some of the questions that I've got put together. So, for example, the flashlight activity that you described seems to have some great potential for integrating science disciplines, the physics of electricity with the geology. Have you made that kind of integration a specific goal, or are there other places that you see opportunities for that kind of integration within the materials specifically?
Well, I'll tell you what, the flashlight thing, and I think I actually read this in a physics, a high school physics blog or something like that, or university blog. I just thought I could use a flashlight as a metal detector, and luster was pretty hard to teach. But the webpage that I constructed on electricity and the movement of electrons, you know what, it's my intuition and approach to say, how can I exploit the geology information to branch out to a broader understanding of general science? And I'll tell you what, when I came to UAB for 19 years, I was teaching geology majors. And then after my department went away, I was teaching freshmen, generally gen ed freshmen. And I came to better understand over the years that many of my students right out of high school really don't have a significant understanding of the interconnections among the scientific disciplines. I happen to be interested in those connections, and so I look for those to exploit. But whatever I've done on my website is just, I haven't followed any program. I've just done what I thought might be interesting from my point of view. So others will have other ways of making those connections. I would love for you to communicate with me, and I'll build those into my website as well. So please get in touch.
Sure. That's a great idea. So I guess there's a couple of pretty straightforward questions. You showed some lab write-ups that were shared by some of your colleagues that you said you were going to make available to the people registered for this webinar, but are those also on the website?
Yes, yes, they are. And I'll tell you what, let me just go back over. I believe they are. Hold on, I didn't get to check everything here. Let me click on over to OMG, and let's see. Now, all you have to do is go to more, and under more there. Oh, you know what? Let's see. Background. You know what? I probably didn't get a chance to put those up. They should have been under activities, but I don't think I put the link to those other documents up here. And all of my, yeah. So Ed, send me a tickler, remind me to do that, and I will put that up here as well.
All right, I sure can.
Okay.
There's a number of questions relating to the use of these materials around in K-12.
Yes.
And I'll start with the most general one, but do you have suggestions for how these materials might be used in K-12 settings, and how that might differ from how they're used in college level settings?
Well, I'll tell you the direct answer is I don't. But I should say that I have a number of thank you notes written to me during the pandemic when we were all teaching remotely. I have thank you notes from teachers in middle school over in Georgia, from Alaska in high school, from Chicago at a magnet school, from New York City at a high school. I have teachers at all these other levels who somehow found my website because I didn't know them. And they are using the links in their own way. They haven't sent me how they're using them. So I don't know how they're using them. And all I can say is that, well, I've got unknown samples here. So let me just show you what my unknowns look like. I mean, here they are. And if you wanted to go to this particular sample, well, here's the webpage on it. And if you wanted to teach something about a metallic mineral, I've got on every unknown, I've got a chart. I've got an image, a high quality image with a ruler. I've got a magnified image of fragments so that if it has distinctive fracture or cleavage, you might be able to see it. I've got these are 10-second videos of luster, for example. And if you really do want to teach luster instead of flashlights, I've got a luster video on every one of those. I've got fragments under transmitted and reflected light because metallic minerals aren't going to transmit light. I've got a 10-second video on a hardness test, and I've got a close-up image as well. So I've got all of these materials. I've even got the streak plate done. I do all of this for every one of my unknowns. And so it's even better because a lot of students don't press hard enough and they don't really get a very good streak, but there it is, right? And so maybe middle and high school teachers can use some of these videos for better understanding how we collect data and how we assess the properties of these materials. And I sort of invented a cute little magnet test. I sort of always wander in like wandering across the landscape and seeing whether it sort of attracts this. And then I've got an acid test for every unknown mineral. So there it is. And if it doesn't react, well, you can tell it within 10 seconds. And if it does, you can as well. So and there's the flashlight test for pyrite. There it is right there. And by the way, only hematite as a submetallic mineral, only hematite is the only common metallic mineral that will not light the flashlight. So you know what? Communicate with me and send me your ideas, and I'll post those on the. Oh, there it is. So pyrite works.
I'll just add my 2 cents worth that I think using the 10-second video idea, keeping it that limited is brilliant because it seems like you can really get the point across pretty quickly on a lot of these things. And
Ed, I decided that face-to-face, a hardness test is a 10-second test. An acid test, it doesn't take 3 minutes. And so, and the other thing that some people have found useful is that what I have also done is to provide a reference set of minerals. So here they are. And on every reference set, what I've done is I haven't done tests for all of these, but what I've provided is I've provided a link to a 3D model, an interactive 3D model, and a single web page that will actually, I call this a visual bank, because unlike a textbook, I don't write out the answers. I created some visuals that show whether it's metallic by lighting the flashlight, what its position is on the hardness scale streak test, and some visuals with regard to this. So it's a little bit different way of providing information about each of those knowns. In demonstrating these, I also, let me just also mention that in terms of teaching about how to assess Mohs hardness, I had already created YouTube videos. These are typically 3 or 4 minute videos. And this is the test on actually how to do the
Mohs scale.
Shut that up. Okay. So I've already created the videos that are narrated in teaching students how to do the test. So I don't actually teach how to do the test anymore in my face-to-face classes even.
Sounds terrific. So one thing, Scott, that came up early on, your title about if it can't be grown, it has to be mined. There was a thought given to what about reclaiming minerals that have already been put in products, electronics, for example, with a lot of the rare earths being there. Do you address any of that on your website?
I don't address it on the website because I just haven't had time to build that part of it out. I actually do have parts of my lecture where I'm building my lecture first, and then I will convert those into activities on the website. If anybody already has any activities related to extraction and applications, I'll be happy to put those, build the webpage and put those into the more section on the website itself. So please just send me what you've got, and I'll be happy to build that out with you.
Well, Scott, that gets at another one of the questions, which is if somebody does have an idea to share with you, is there an input page or is it as simple as just emailing you?
Oh, just email. Where's my email? I think it's up on my slides here, right on the left. There it is, sbrande@uab.edu.
Okay, terrific. And what you just said also gets into another area that was a question about what do you see as the areas of highest need for additional materials? Like you mentioned the images that you'd like to have and sort of the high value targets, so to speak. In that, do you see other areas where you'd like to see either people sharing things or that you intend to go on in terms of your development?
Well, I'll tell you one set of comments I've had over the course of the pandemic and through last fall as well is I have built in, here are the unknown samples, 4, 8, 12, 16, 22, 26. I've got about 28 samples there. So I mean, you know what? I had to scavenge out of the annex before it was destroyed. I had to scavenge samples I could bring home. If anybody wants to send me samples of unknown minerals that I don't have on my website, it takes me a while to sort of build the resources required, but I'll be happy to list you as a contributor with your name. These are all my images. These are all my samples, with the exception of a few from the University of Montevallo. But if anybody wants to send me samples to help build this out for which they could use their students for their minerals, I'd be happy to work with them doing that as well.
That sounds like a great offer. I think you've already answered this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask just to make sure, and that is, as you've had various people using these resources, these wonderful resources, have you been able to collect or document any of the use cases? That is, how other people are using them in different settings, so that maybe somebody who's seeing the value but might benefit from ideas of how others have used them might be able to pick up on what others have done.
Two things. I have asked people who have written me for the answer key, then I can correspond with them. I have comments in individual emails. I haven't collated them, but I do have instructors at 2-year community colleges. I have instructors at 4-year research institutions. I have colleagues, of course, like Catherine Reichar at Columbia, South Carolina, and others who are in geoscience education. So I've got comments in their individual emails, but I think maybe one of the best ways to see the diversity of uses is to go to those documents, which you will have access to, that are the individual mineral identification Word documents. It's their lab, and they're being used at Drexel University, Chandler Community College, Belmont College in Nashville, so and Alex out at Fort Worth, Texas. And there's a great diversity in the degree of detail, the amount of sort of in-depth or superficial use of the resources. I think that one particular lab activity, which is just mineral identification, among those maybe 8 or 9 labs, those Word documents, you will get a pretty good idea of how instructors at different universities have exploited the very same online materials to align with their student populations.
Sure, sure. That's a great idea. And you mentioned your colleague, I don't know if you said it was cognitive psychologist or
Rob Nosofsky up at Indiana.
Are the results from that work, are they available yet? Or
Okay, so I'll tell you what. I didn't have students on campus for 2 years, so I got a year extension on the NSF grant, and I have the first set of data from my students in lab last fall, and I can't reveal those. but statistically they mean nothing. It's a small cohort, and what I'm going to be doing is to run my students in my lab to, by the way, the model is, I have students in 3 groups: students who learn by picking up physical samples, students who learn from 3D models only, and students who learn half from physical samples and half from 3D models. So that's the experimental design that Rob set out for me. I delivered those to my students. I made the 3D models. I helped to develop the software, and we have the data for the very first cohort. By the end of the 4th cohort, we should know whether we will be able to help students learn to identify rocks, igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. We will have the first data in the nation to understand the degree to which students can learn how to identify rocks from physical samples alone, 3D models alone, or half time on each.
well, that gives us something to definitely look forward to as those results come out, because there'll be a lot of value there. I'm noticing the time, and I'm sure that Missy's starting to think about the closing screens and the things that we need to do, including a feedback. But Scott, thank you so very much. I think we could take, just if somebody had a quick question. I think I've addressed them all, but does anybody have anything else they'd like to unmute and ask or comment on? I think people are noticing the time too. So I'm gonna move on quickly, because we do have some closure that we need to do here. Scott, thank you so very much. This is fantastic, a fantastic resource or set of resources.
And thank you to AGI, NAGT, CERC, and the other organizations as well.